Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to a new week in ESL 350. And this week we're going to be concentrating on conclusions to an essay. And we're going to be talking about something that I think is going to be more than what you expect from conclusions. Because I'm sure that you've heard in the past that conclusions are a restatement of your thesis, a summary of your thesis. Now, there are teachers that may ask you to do that, and if they do, that's fine. But just a restatement of your thesis, where you're taking your thesis statement and you're just using other words to talk about it, is what was done in high school. It's a step in the right direction as far as trying to bring your paper to a close. But now that you're writing at the college level, and you will be going into English 200, which is a native English speaking course, and from there, you'll be going to English 1A, which is English composition. And you're going to be doing a lot more analysis of your writing and reflection in your writing. Then we really need to take the conclusion to a higher purpose, if you will. We need to be more sophisticated in our approach. We need to be more reflective. We need to think about it, we need to analyze it, and we need to really leave our reader with a strong feeling about the paper. Because when we write for a purpose. Now, I know when you're in college, you're writing an essay, you're thinking, I'm going to write this for the teacher, I'll put the check in the box, I'm going to get this assignment over with, I get my grade, and she leaves me alone until the next paper. But I need to get you thinking at a higher critical thinking level. I want to do this because that's what's going to be expected of you from this point on. So I have a YouTube video here that was done by Dr. Randy Laced, and he is going to give a small lesson, about 7 minutes, on how to write 5 different conclusions. Now, he does use college level vocabulary when he talks about these conclusions, but what he says is very important. In fact, I would bookmark it, and I would use it for even later times, even after my class, and get used to this way of thinking when you write your conclusions. I do recommend, though, because he talks a little fast and he uses higher level vocabulary words, a couple of things I recommend you do. Number 1, put on your closed captions, okay? You want to put on your closed captions because obviously it's going to help you with staying up with him. You're probably going to need to look up some of the vocabulary words that he uses, and you're probably going to need to listen to this maybe 3 to 4 times at least. Another thing I would recommend you do is under your settings here, if you click under settings and you have your playback speed, right now it's on normal, I might recommend that you take it to 75%. Slow them down a little bit, that way you're not struggling because you're non-native. And there is vocabulary that you have to deal with. So, and even slower if you want to, but 75% is probably good for you to listen to. So that's my recommendation, is for you to change your speed there. So once you do all that, I believe that you will get more out of this lesson. Okay? Now what I'm going to do for you is each of the 5 things that he recommends as the different types of conclusions, I'm going to write those conclusions, a sample of each of his conclusions for you. From my paper that I've been writing with you on Jeanette and her father's alcoholism and how she still was successful even though he was an alcoholic. So I've written 5 conclusions based on each one of his suggestions here. So pause this video, make sure you listen to the Writing Great Conclusions right here, this one here. Do this first before you listen to the rest of this video when I write my 5 conclusions, okay? So go listen to this video, come back, and then watch the rest of it. Great, welcome back. So you may have listened to this maybe 3 or 4 times, his lesson on writing great conclusions. So now let's take a look at a sample of each one of these, and I'll bring mine up here so that you guys can see it. Okay, let me come up here. What I did was, just so you can be reminded of what I wrote, I'm going to bring up my introduction again because it will naturally have my thesis and it will have my hooks and it will have my background information. And for the first conclusion method, I need my introduction to show you. So Dr. Laced said the first thing that you could do for conclusion is you can circle back to the introduction. Circle back means to go back and refer to that introduction in some way. And he recommends that you use your hook or your attention grabber to tie it in so people go, oh, I remember her saying that in the beginning of the essay and it was important then, and now she's going to tie it in to how she's going to summarize and conclude the essay. So if you remember, I did a statistic and I did an anecdote. An anecdote is just a story that ties into your main idea, and usually it's a personal story. Okay, so I talked about my mother being a survivor of an alcoholic parent, and she was successful despite the fact that she had to go through these many types of difficult situations. So what I did was I wrote my conclusion based on that. So I circled back around and I decided to just put the anecdote back into my conclusion. So this is what I wrote. It is amazing to think that Jeanette, just like my mother, were able to find their way to adulthood in a sane and positive way despite suffering from the abuses of alcoholism imposed on them by their fathers. It is not that either were left without some scars, some issues of trust, or the intense desire not to repeat history, but rather it was the culmination of all their survival skills, the determination to make their life successful, and most importantly, their ability to forgive their parents that gave them their peace of mind and happiness in the end. Get rid of that, so I have to add it out. Okay, so notice that I talk about my mom and just a little bit, but I compare her to Jeanette because it wasn't about my mom, it was about Jeanette and me comparing just a same circumstance with my mom that I tied it back in. Okay, so that's circling back to the introduction. So you might want to do this in your introduction. Maybe it will be off your quote, it will be off your question, it will be off your personal story, it will be off some of the other things that we did was a metaphor that you used, a poem, a rhyme, a proverb, a idiom, anything like that you used as your hook, you can tie back into your conclusion or circle it back into the introduction as it's called. The second one he talked about was articulate a call to action. Basically, you're having your reader do something as a result of the issue that you raised. So we were doing a cause and effect, and I don't know how or what issue you focused on. It could have been domestic violence, it could have been on bullying, it could have been on sexual assault. I don't know which it was, but whatever the issue, ask your readers to go do something about it, okay? So here is the way I wrote my conclusion as a call to action. I said, some may hope that Jeanette's ability to translate her sufferings in childhood to success in adulthood would be the ability of every child of an alcoholic. But this is often not the case. What is needed is early intervention and reporting by public schools to detect the signs of a child's poverty, neglect, or abuse. Such early intervention can change the course of a child's life. So we need to write our congressman, and I really should say congressperson, that's being sexist there, congressman or congresswoman, and press, and I should say them, press them to give schools more power to step in and be the advocate for that child, or be the supporter of that child, or be the fighter for that child, or be the voice for that child. Anything you want to say. So I can say either congressman or congresswoman, but we can just say, I want to put that in there so I don't sound sexist. Okay? So that's my plea to my reader. That's my asking them to go, hey, go do something. Let's go do this so we can help children for the future. Okay? Then this is a very important one. This one is called the why. Why did you write this paper? Who cares? What's the significance? So what, Stevie? So what that you wrote this paper? What do you want me to feel? What do you want me to get out of it? Okay, so you could look at this as the why, the significant, or what's the purpose that you wrote this essay for. So my significance, my so what is, well, this is what. This is why it's important. So I even put that into my first sentence. I said, one of the most significantly powerful outcomes, let's see, I use significant here. An outcome is just a reason, right? So I said, one of the most significantly powerful outcomes of Jeanette's story is how she helped open up the conversation about what it is to be poor and to live through many of the incredible hardships that she faced. After her book became a bestseller, she received thousands of letters from people around the world who told her they felt she was telling their story through her writing. They wrote how sexual assault was viewed as common and ordinary, and that it was just part of childhood for many. They wrote how they blamed themselves for not being able to change the circumstances that caused so much harm. But Jeanette's success as an adult gave them permission to accept the past as the past, to forgive oneself and others, and then go ahead and lead a fruitful and happy life. So her book, The So What, is, I wrote this so people could understand that Jeanette wrote this story so people could see that she faced a lot of things that many people face, but she was still able to come through it, so can other people come through it. So can other people live on and be able to put the past behind them. So that's highly significant, right? When we all feel like we're in the same boat, we're like, oh, that happened to you too, and you're okay. Oh, maybe I can be okay. Maybe I don't have to be ashamed. So let's look at example number 4 that the professor uses in his video. Now he talks about explain the value of the topic in its role in the future. So he calls it the future. But what I'm saying is, what is the value of what you wrote for us looking at the future? And he says you need to take a step back and look at it this way. You take a step back when we want to assess a situation and say, okay, well, wait a minute, what's the meaning of it? It's almost like, what's the meaning of life? Or why, what's the whole picture? What's the whole story here? What do we need to look at in its greater sense? Not just that little focus, not the alcoholism, not just the abuse, but what is it for the future? So my response, and folks, you can write your conclusions just many different ways, and it's just up to you what details you want to focus on and how creative you want to be. Okay, so for the future, I said this. The popularity of The Glass Castle and Jeanette's frank and honest look at social issues such as poverty, domestic violence, mental illness, alcoholism, and sexual abuse provides an opportunity for people to look at these issues in a different light, basically in a different way, okay? In the past, talking about being poor, having an alcoholic parent, being a victim of domestic violence, and suffering from sexual assault were issues that were not talked openly about and often brought shame to those who were living these circumstances. By having The Glass Castle read and analyzed in schools, it gives us the opportunity to talk about these issues, take away the shame, and be able to move on from the effects of these negative and traumatic experiences. So the future is, the more people write about it, the more people let it be talked about in schools, and the more we're honest about it, the more we can have a conversation as a society and say, we're not going to accept it anymore. It's not okay to do these things to children. And we're not going to be quiet about it anymore. And we're not going to let children feel blamed or shamed or guilty for parents' actions or for people in our lives' actions, uncles and aunts or whoever, okay? So that's the role in the future. Yeah, it gives us a voice. It lets us talk about it. All right. And then his fifth method, he said, considered and answered questions. So what questions are we not asking? Maybe there's a different way to ask the questions so that we go, oh, you know what? We haven't looked at this, or we're not being honest enough, or we're not confronting this problem the way it should be confronted. So why hasn't this problem been solved to date? Well, what's the issue? We're an advanced society. Why isn't it done? So the way I wrote this one is I said one might consider why it is, and I should put that here, why it is that Jeanette wrote her story and named it after a broken promise her father made to his children as they were growing up. Because, of course, it's called The Glass Castle. And, I should put this in parentheses, made a broken promise her father made to her children as they were growing up. I should probably say the promise was the building of the glass castle. So I might add that in later. What were the circumstances that made it so difficult for a man of Rex Wall's obvious intelligence, he was very smart, to build a house for his family when he had the capability to do so? He was smart. His wife had a lot of money. Okay. They had a house that they could have used in Phoenix. What was the problem? He had the means to do it. So what was the issue? So I asked, was it just the alcoholism, or was it an issue more deeply embedded into his self-esteem? Was it that he too may have suffered from sexual abuse and alcoholism, and we'll get rid of that, during the formative years of his childhood, that he was unable to escape the stigma of it in the end? So what that means, everybody, stigma is the way people see you or your reputation. Back then, let me tell you, in the 50s, a man didn't come out and say he was sexually assaulted as a child or even as an adult. Men just did not say that. In fact, it's still hard for men today. So he was suffering from the fact that his mother did things to him that a mother or father, an adult, no one should ever do. How does that make a man feel? It makes him feel less of a man. Unfortunately, it shouldn't, but that's the way society was back then. Okay? So again, was it that he too may have suffered from sexual abuse and alcoholism during the formative years of his childhood, that he was unable to escape the stigma of it in the end? Was it that we can, as a society, what is it? There it is. What is it that we can do as a society to help young boys and men to come forward without guilt or shame and let them tell their stories so they can avoid the pitfalls, the traps, the embarrassment, whatever, that make them keep their pain bottled up inside them or release it in very destructive ways? And I might add this. What is it that still needs to be done? And then, see, I leave you with this question. I'm not answering the question. I don't know. So what the professor was saying was, it's something that hasn't been solved yet. It's a question that hasn't been answered. So in your own essay, can you propose something that you don't think people are being asked yet? They're not asking the tough questions, basically. So I'm saying, what is it that still needs to be done? And your reader is thinking, what is it that still needs to be done? What do we have to do? Stricter laws, or do we need safe places for guys? Do we need hotlines for children? You start the ball rolling inside your head to think, well, what do we need to do? So you noticed I asked a series of questions here, and that is, I hope, deep enough to encourage reflection and thought by my reader. And that's what I'm trying to do my reader. I'm not just saying, here, just read my essay because you have to, and there's really no purpose. I just got to write it for my teacher. I really want you to write your essay like you're going to give it to people in the world and you want to make them think about it. Okay? So now, folks, if the way I write makes you nervous, and what I mean by that is you might be saying, wow, Miss Daniels, I'm not going to write like that. Not yet. And I'm going to say, you will one day. Do I expect you to write at this level right now? No. I expect you to make grammatical mistakes. I expect that your sentence structure is not going to be perfect. I expect that your vocabulary is not going to be as high as mine yet. I expect that maybe even critically thinking, I know you can do it in your language. You're experts at critical thinking in your language. Brilliant, actually. But maybe you lack the English to be able to relate it to me. So I don't want you to be intimidated by my writing, because I'm a professor of English as a second language. I've been doing this for years. I'm a native speaker, and this is what I'm supposed to be able to do, right? So I'm trained at this. So I don't want anybody to feel, wait a minute, I can't do that, so I'm not going to try, or I'm going to panic, or I'm just not going to do the assignment, or I'm going to drop. I want you to know that I look at your writing and I embrace your writing. I love your writing. Write in your way, okay? And then that way I can help you bring it to a higher level. All right? This is just a model. But you do what you can do, and then I'll work with you to make it even better. Now, I haven't looked at your writing yet. I know you're like, oh, well, I need help. And we're going to do that this week. And next week, you're going to turn in your full essay. And I'm going to be giving you written feedback and help. I'm not going to grade it. I'm just going to give you my comments. And I'm just going to push you even a little bit further along and let you revise your draft so it can make it even better. And you feel really good about your end product a couple of weeks down the road. Okay? So no worries. You've got this. Go out there, think critically, and do your best. All right. We'll see you in class.